Welcome everybody then. It is November 18th, 2020. This is the Upper Dublin School District Finance Committee, and I will call the meeting to order. We have 3 of the 4 committee members here so far, myself, Amy Fransek, and Mike Henderson. Stan Ropsky is expected to be a little bit late. Let's dive right in. Mr. Leckman, are there any announcements or communications?
There are none this evening.
All right, thank you. We do have minutes from our October meeting. Our members of the committee have had a chance to review them. Are members prepared to approve those minutes?
Yes, we are.
Amy? I don't hear Amy.
Sorry, couldn't get the mute to unmute. I'm here and it's good to go.
All right, thank you. So those are approved, and we will see those on the legislative agenda as an informational item. And let's head into the SRMS update. I assume that's Bob.
Yes, give you an update there. We're continuing to make good progress. Everything's moving along. Some of the significant portions, the brickwork is almost completed on the exterior of the classroom wings. So that's moving along very well, so it allows them to put the windows in. So at the time of this report, which I think they're a little further than that right now, the windows are at 80%. They're getting ready to start the windows on the stairways, on the ends and in that center stairway. Classroom roofing is at 98%. With the windows moving along, going in, this is great news. It looks like they're going to be able to get some temporary heat in there probably sometime next month, so they can start doing more work through the winter on the inside of the building. Because right now everything's framed out in the classroom wing. The metal studs are in, and the drywall is progressing on the first floor rather well. And they want to start putting some coats of spackle on the drywall. So with that temporary heat that they're getting ready to put in, they'll be able to continue working right through the winter. Some other milestones: concrete floors are going in on the first floor of, we'll call that the athletic wing. They're up past the library's been concreted. All the hallways, including the main office, what's going to be the guidance office, and out front of the auditorium are all completed. And they're looking to move quickly into the auditorium to start some of those concrete floors. The block work in the gymnasium is well along. I think they have the two outside walls completed. Just 2 more interior walls to do, and we'll be in good shape there as well. All the electrical contractor, he's moving along. Their underground piping's all in. Mechanical ductwork is going in. Equipment started arriving. Some of the air handlers, we're getting deliveries for the air handlers that go into the mezzanine mechanical room and on the rooftop. So the equipment's starting to show up, and we're progressing well.
Excellent. Looks like great progress. And Andy, is there anything to call our attention to in the budget document?
Yeah, just real quick. Last month we reviewed the Dewey contract, so we did make the official update to fix Dewey's costs at $2,450,000. That's added in here, and in order to accomplish that, I reduced the project contingency budget by $175,000. So you can see we're still trending about $98,000 better than planned. The other thing, 2 things just to mention, are we did receive the second and final reimbursement request for the ACE grant, which is related to LEED Gold on our building. So that is received. So we've received all of the ACE funds at this time. And we did also submit and receive the second land development escrow reimbursement from Upper Dublin Township. We just received that today. So that'll be reflected in some of the documents that we submit next month. So other than that, things are pretty smooth from a budget standpoint.
Great, thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee or members of the board?
No.
All right, thank you both very much for that update. We do have a change order for Sandy Run for COVID-19 protocols.
Yes, so again, this is a change order from our general contractor, Skepton. If you remember back early on when the pandemic first began, in order to get the project up and running, we did work with Dewey and very closely with Skepton in order to get the project back up and running. This is a change order that we will now see on a regular basis. We did agree. They have porta potties out on the site that need to be cleaned on a regular basis, and that cleaning is what's an additional cost to make sure we're in line with COVID protocols. So again, every few months we will see a change order for the cleaning of these porta potties out on the site.
Okay, and is that already reflected in the budget? In the updated budget document?
That is included in the budget document. So it's in the change order. It's included in the total GC contract cost.
Okay.
It was like a little over $7,000.
Any other comments or questions? All right, members of the committee will move that one forward to the legislative meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have our parameters resolution.
Yeah, so this item is a standard step in our process to issue our general obligation bonds for our projects. So this is the GOB of 2021. So you'll see everything is very much in line with what PFM reviewed with us at the October committee meeting. So there's 3 attachments included here. The first attachment is the Moody's rating press release. So every time we go through a bond issue, we do have to speak with Moody's, which is the credit rating organization that provides our credit rating. So they assigned us with a AA3, which is consistent with past ratings, and is certainly a very strong rating, judged by high quality and subject to very low credit risk. So ultimately that comes back and keeps us at a very competitive interest rate on our borrowing. The second document in here is the bond sale document from PFM. So this is similar to what PFM walked through with us at the October Finance Committee meeting. So certainly it's just a reference point. I don't intend to go through this in detail again. One thing that PFM did note, and again, our financing team will be at the board meeting on Monday night. There will be a presentation around this on Monday night. PFM did note that interest rates, yes, while they've ticked up ever so slightly, are still very much unchanged after the election. So the election was sort of this point where things could have changed, but things seem to be pretty steady, and they still recommend we move forward with our plan of borrowing, on the timeline we've set out. And then the third is the actual resolution that will be on the board agenda for Monday night to move forward with this borrowing. So again, large document, a lot of information consistent to what you've approved in the past. And again, our financing team will be here on Monday night to go through this in a lot more detail. One item, again, I think I just want to take a minute to recap about the borrowing here. So, one of the things we did discuss at the last meeting, secondarily to this, what PFM presented, was the idea of borrowing an additional $5 million on this borrowing for the potential, as we look forward, of a transportation facility. And I just want to make sure to go back and recap that real quick and make sure there's no further questions tonight. So the $5 million that we reviewed last month was only a placeholder estimate. And the feasibility study, which we'll talk about at another agenda item tonight, will be to generate a cost estimate for this project. So that the actual cost estimate will be part of the feasibility study. So we have a $5 million placeholder. While we only have a placeholder estimate at this point, I believe this offers flexibility and options that are needed for the following reasons. So we're borrowing this placeholder of $5 million now at historically low rates. If the feasibility study or some other factor causes the board not to be able to move forward with the transportation project, we would just simply borrow less with the last borrowing next year. So we have planned $10 million borrowing, we would just borrow $5 million less there. If that transportation facility ends up being more than the $5 million placeholder, and the board would still be supportive of that, that last borrowing next year then would allow for borrowing up to $10 million to complete the project. So we'll likely have some, with the way the budget is trending, its potential will have some flexibility. The project being less, we still have 1.6 million in contingency. Other things could come through that reduce the budget, and we could have flexibility if needed next year. The other thing is that flexibility is only needed to meet the bank qualified borrowing, which would be a borrowing less than $10 million. The worst case scenario would be if the project was more than expected and we were still supportive of moving it forward, we would just borrow in a non-bank qualified borrowing over $10 million. Interest rates are still at historic lows, so that would really kind of be the worst case scenario if that, if it comes out not at $5 million. So I think we still continue to move forward at the borrowing where it's at. I understand $5 million is still just a rough estimate, a guesstimate, so to speak, but I believe there's plenty of flexibility here that the board has. We're certainly not locking ourselves into anything by borrowing this $5 million extra on top of what we were looking at for this borrowing in prior to last month. So I'll stop there and certainly take any questions. If there's any specific questions related to the parameters resolution that I can't answer, I'll make sure our financing team can answer it on Monday night.
All right, so to clarify the $5 million number, well, I think at the last meeting, I and probably other board members were thinking that was based mostly on an estimate for how much it looked like it might cost to build this thing. It's really a number picked based on maximum flexibility for this and the following borrowing. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair, Mr. Sirota. I also think it's probably a decent ballpark number. So I don't think it's a number we expect to come in significantly higher or significantly lower. I think it's a good round number, but we need the feasibility study to validate that.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions?
No, thanks.
All right. So, Art, go ahead.
Thank you. Am I unmuted? Yes.
Yep.
Just to clarify too, Andy, if you look at the potential motion for next week, some of the community members might be confused by the $73,250,000 amount, but I just wanted to clarify that amount includes the $5 million we're referring to, plus all the refinancing, plus probably $35 million in addition to it's what we were thinking of going out in this parameter resolution. So it includes everything. We're not borrowing $73 million for the middle school project, but all the refinancing. The other point I wanted to make is the only disadvantage of borrowing the additional $5 million, if we don't do the project now, somebody mentioned it last time, we would start paying the interest on the $5 million that we don't really need. That's to me, that's the only disadvantage. And I wonder if there was any other way to use any other funds and then reimburse capital or debt service funds if we do move forward. It's just something to maybe think about over the next few weeks.
Yeah, so the only thing I would say to that, Dr. Levinowitz, is we don't really have any more time to make that decision. So it's already advertised. So I think while we would pay interest on that $5 million, that's correct. It's historically low interest rates. So there's also interest rate risk that you're assuming there. If interest rates go up over the next year, it's possible that we would just be borrowing that $5 million next year at a higher interest rate. So it's certainly a valid point, but there's interest rate risk either way you look at that. And we would, if we waited it out until next year, there's no chance we'd be able to achieve bank qualified borrowing next year and do the transportation project. So those are just things to consider.
I get it now, and thanks for clarifying that. And that's. And then I strongly support that we move forward with this. I think it makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you, Andy.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, so we'll look forward to that presentation next week, and are members of the committee prepared to move this forward to the legislative agenda?
Yes.
And I didn't hear Amy. Amy, you can wave and thumbs up or
Sounds
say yes.
good.
Yep. All right. Great. Thank you. So we'll move that one forward. Next up is our regular disposal of excess, obsolete, and non-repairable equipment.
We have the transportation facility item.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr.
Yeah,
Srms,
just I
item B.
skipped a little one there. Sorry. Yeah, let's talk about the RFP.
Yep. So again, I think we wanted to put this on the agenda for this evening. Again, not to walk through it point by point, but just as a matter of, again, I think there was some concern at the last meeting about transparency through the process. And this is really our effort to continue to show transparency, to say, this is the next step in the process of the transportation facility, is to put an RFP together, which we have attached to the agenda tonight, to go out and solicit proposals from firms that are interested in doing this feasibility study for us. So one of the things I just want to start, in case anyone wasn't here at the last meeting, in case anyone new is listening. So at the last meeting, we really discussed this next step being to prepare the RFP. And some of the key points that I talked about last meeting about the need for a new transportation facility and why we believe now is sort of an opportune time to do that is in 2008, when the high school was built, we have plans that were drawn up for a transportation facility on the site that we're currently recommending to build on. So the site that we're talking about, just as a recap, is the unused land between Fort Washington Elementary School and the Field of Dreams. It's land that the district already owns, and we're not currently using the land. We currently lease a facility for our transportation department, which is in not very good condition at all. So the placeholder of $5 million of debt service, which we just talked about in the last item, to, as a placeholder to build this facility, if the facility costs in and around $5 million, the annual cost of that additional debt service would actually be less than what we're paying per year to lease our facility, which is around $450,000. So a new facility would potentially give us some budget relief in our annual operating budget. So that's those are the key points that we're looking at of why we're looking to do this project. The next step in the process is to take this RFP now and go out and solicit proposals from firms. And then part of the scope of work of this feasibility study is to deliver a cost estimate, which will then give us more concrete information about how, what this project could look like. Can it fit and work on the land that we're looking at? We know there's plans that happened 10 years ago, but that needs to be rethought, reimagined. And then, is $5 million the right number? We worked with our district solicitor to create the attached RFP. Mr. Lester and I reviewed it, made a couple minor tweaks, and we plan to release this again. There's an estimated timeline in the document. We're hoping to release this on Friday, have a pre-proposal meeting on December 2nd, deadline for questions from vendors on December 9th, proposals due back to us on December 16th, and then, follow-ups and meetings with potential firms to bring back to the January Finance Committee meeting our recommendation on who to move forward with this next step. So that's where we're at in the process. Certainly the RFP's here. If anyone reviewed it and has questions, I'm happy to answer. But that's where we're at in the process.
Great. And to clarify for everybody, this is informational at this point for the committee. We don't actually require any board action, but certainly welcome board input. Art.
Yeah, just let everyone know, the meat of this is just the last page, the bottom of page 4 and the top of page 5. It's just the scope of services. I think it's very helpful. It was very clear for me, Andy, what we were asking these people, whoever we do eventually hire to do. And I thought that really clarified everything, for me. The question that I have, Andy, is we I think I'm correct. We do not have to take the lowest bidder on this, but it's the bidder that we feel most comfortable with working with. Is that correct?
That is correct. The RFP sort of lays out all the things that we're looking for them to submit so we can decide that. So that's letter E in this, which starts on page 3. But you are absolutely right, and it says right in here that, you know, in an RFP process, we are not required to take the low bidder. We can review it and we can determine who we feel would be the best fit to do this work for us.
Yeah, to clarify that for any of the newer board members who may not have been through this, there is a process, a formal bid process that we're required to go through for some sorts of projects, mostly driven by cost, in which we do have to take the lowest responsible bidder. This is not that process. So this is just review proposals from companies, pick the one we like the best, or none of them if we don't like any of them.
But again, Andy, the current plan does not do anything to the so-called Field of Dreams.
That is correct. It does not impact any current
Field of
facilities that we have on our grounds.
Amy, go ahead.
I just want to, you know, more of a comment that I appreciate the way we're going about this, and that we are using the RFP process, and that we are not sort of just handing this off to a familiar organization. I know that's been something that I've been concerned about and that members of the community have expressed concern about, and I really appreciate the administration's efforts to make this a really thorough and fair process.
Jeff.
Andy, somewhat piggybacking on Amy, ballpark of how many firms we would like to see this RFP go to. I mean, we obviously can't control who will respond, but just a ballpark of distribution.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see 3 to 5 minimum that we reach out to, and then if more jump on, obviously we'll post it on our website. That would be great.
Great, thank you.
Amy, your hand is still up. Did you have more? Okay, Titia?
Yeah, thanks. Will the people who put in for this RFP have access to the materials that were designed 10 years ago or collected for this purpose?
Yes, absolutely. So I think point 1 under scope of services really talks about analysis of district needs. And when we hire someone, we will absolutely provide them with all that information that we have. Absolutely.
To be clear, and Bob or Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have a formal design. I think this never went through a formal design process. We have sketches, plan view sketches that show where a building could go and where buses could be parked, but this never actually, as far as I know, went through a full design process with an architect. Is that correct?
That's correct. The information that we found was on the land development for the high school. So there was work that was done for drainage. I know the temporary parking was down there, some lay down area for the high school. So that was all taken into account. So, but there was no actual building design, but there is significant land development design and product installed already for drainage down in that area. They captured the stormwater.
Right. All right, anybody else with comments or questions on this item? All right, so we look forward to seeing the returns from this RFP after it goes out next week. Now, next up, we have our disposal of excess, obsolete, and non-repairable equipment.
Yeah, just a few more smaller items. We found a few old radios. They don't meet the FCC requirements for narrow banding, so they can't be programmed for our frequencies. There's no use to these radios anymore. So that's an item that would be sent to our electronics recycler. We also have jerseys from volleyball. So we'd work with athletics to find the best way to dispose of those. And then the last significant number of metal chairs at Thomas Fitzwater. My recommendation would be to this, so we can break them up into small groups, put it on municipal, see if there's any value to them. If not, we can work on anywhere else that would need them. any groups within the schools or community, we could work with them as well.
All right. Any comments or questions? All right. So, sorry, Titia.
The chairs, are they still in good working order?
I don't know. I need further investigation. They really need to be pulled out and looked at them closely. With the students not being in the next 2 weeks, that'll give us a good opportunity to go over every individual chair to kind of sort those out to see what shape they're in.
All right. So members of the committee will move this one forward to the legislative meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Andy, anything to call our attention to in the monthly financial reports?
Yes, I have a couple things I just want to walk through and highlight here. In the treasurer's report, first off, just want to note total revenue collection percentage is right in line with prior year, around 77%. Real estate tax is showing a 98% of budget collected. And again, since we have this other financial report, I think it's noteworthy just to mention that that percentage is going to look different than what's on the actual tax collection report. So that's 98% of our budget that's been collected to date, not the total collection percentage of bills paid on that report. So I thought that was important to note. The interim taxes.
98% of 95%? Is that what you mean?
98% is the percentage of budget that's collected. On the tax collection report, it's 91.7% of the actual taxes that have been collected.
But we projected a lower amount of the percentage we've anticipated to be lower next year. The collection, the rate.
Correct. We budgeted less tax revenue because we anticipated a lower collection rate. So, that's collection of budget that we're seeing there.
Exactly.
So if we come in and we collect at a higher rate than what we budgeted at, then we'll collect 100+% of our budget. We'll be above budget collections.
And we did 95% or 94%?
91.
Yes, we budgeted about 95.3%. We budgeted at a 95.3% collection rate.
Thank you.
And so far we've collected 91 point something of that.
Correct.
Yeah.
The interim taxes is already reporting higher than budget as of October. And I thought that was important to note because we are certainly seeing new assessments from new developments, but that's not the majority of this amount. About 118,000 of this total is annual tax bills that were reissued as interims. So important to note, and I'll give you an example of what exactly that means with some of the new developments going on out there. So Madison Estates, as that's actually subdivided, it was subdivided in the July-August timeframe. So one tax bill was actually sent to the property owner for $42,000. Then in July, there was a subdivision carving out 12 of those individual lots. The property owner hadn't yet paid their bill in July yet. So the way our tax collector needs to record that is the original bill gets deleted for $42,000. And then there's 12 individual tax bills that are then sent out to the owner, one for the main area and then 11 or 12 for the subdivided lots. So that all shows up as interim. So it's important to note that there's some of that going on in that number. That's all not just new development. The other item I want to mention, and you don't see it necessarily on this report, but I think it's important to note for this year, is about property tax relief. So if you all remember back to the May or June timeframe when we were talking about a final budget for 2021, districts across the state were notified that the state miscalculated the amount of gaming funds that were available to distribute to school districts and ultimately homeowners for property tax relief in the way of homestead and farmstead rebates. So if you remember, the estimate was about 50% that they had miscalculated that by. And then that was a huge issue. They came back and said they figured it out, they resolved it, and that school districts would get all of the money that they had already certified and that would eventually benefit homeowners. So it turns out an article just came out that the state was planning on using about $300 million of the federal CARES funding to replace this gaming revenue. And it just came out that the federal government denied Pennsylvania's use of CARES funding to replace revenue. So this is really an issue for school districts across the state. It leaves open the potential for significant lost revenue if the state can't figure out how to replace that revenue and get it out to school districts. So our amount for this year was a little over 2.5 million. We should have received that all by now based on the payment timeline. And we're short about $826,000 to date, with really no real information about where that money's coming from. So again, we will continue to watch this and keep the board up to date on this. But this is a real issue for us this year. It's also a real issue for what this could potentially mean for that rebate in the 21-22 budget. Because if you remember, every homeowner received a rebate of $352 or just a direct reduction on their bill for that homestead amount. So this is a big, potentially open issue here. So I'll stop there on the treasurer's report. I just said a lot, and just see if there's any questions on that piece of it.
I will say that some of us, at least on the board, have already been lobbying our lawmakers on this issue to make sure they find a way to replace that funding. Not that we have any solution to offer. Art, go ahead.
Yeah, Andy, we earlier today, some of us had a meeting with Congresswoman Dean, and this was brought up. It's $200 million that the state still owes to pay out to districts. And I got a feeling we're not going to be seeing that money for a long time. I think that's a great concern, I think, for all of us. But I think greater concern that you're going to have to confront is next year. I mean, this comes from direct gaming money, the gambling, the casinos. A portion of that goes to districts. We got exactly $351.88 on every tax bill. There is a reduction. We don't know what that reduction is going to be, and it's going to be a great concern, because for those individuals in Upper Down that pay a low tax bill, that's a significant amount of money for them in proportion to their tax bill. So we have to follow this very closely. I know, Andy, your organization, PASBA, I know PSBA, we are working diligently to try to find a remedy for this. But next year, we really need to keep our eyes open for this.
Titia.
Yeah, I'm a little curious about the earned income tax, because I'm hearing that a number of people, because they're working at home, from home, that they are no longer paying city or tax in Philadelphia. Are we going to see an impact of that at this end, or am I missing something?
So that gets in. I mean, I'm happy to transition to that. Gets into the next set of reportings,
Okay.
and I am going to touch on that a little bit.
All right. All right.
In that area.
And
Certainly, I will be honest, I do not have a great answer to your question. Our Berkheimer, our tax collector, doesn't either, but it's a good question that I continue to ask, but I'll cover that in a second.
Okay.
All right, anyone else on the first set of monthly reports? Okay, let's move on, Andy.
Okay, so on the other financial reporting package, on page 2, I want to note that we gained over $3 million in assessed value from last month to this month. A large chunk of that was $2.2 million from the district-initiated appeal for 1145 Virginia Drive. That settlement occurred in October. But we are also beginning to see assessments from the Enclave. So on this report, we actually have 5 properties that settled at the Enclave, and 63 properties have been sold to date. So again, sold is, they're building a new development, they're selling lots and selling homes on those lots, but they're not yet built. So 63 sold, 5 have already been assessed. We're continuing to monitor the promenade. So we're working with our tax collector and county assessor and our solicitor to monitor the promenade. We believe we may start to see, we believe we will see our first assessment on the promenade in January, but we're continuing to pay very close attention to that. And the other thing I think it's important to note, again, I know we keep talking about this report is so important so you can see that yes, we have new developments out there, but we're giving away money on the other side on assessment appeals, homeowners and commercial properties appealing their assessments. You can see that just the 5 properties of the enclave, and Brooke, if you could actually bring up the other document, that would be helpful just to make sure everyone's looking at it. Page 2 of the other financial reports. Because I do just want to point this out on here. If you scroll to page 2, keep scrolling a little bit further, keep going. All right, right here. So if you notice under the monthly basic column, September and October, you see those big reductions of 730,000. Now this is assessed value, not tax dollars. 730,000 reduction in September and 710,000 in October of reduced assessed values due to annual residential appeals where Montgomery County Board of Assessments reduced taxes for residential properties, offset all new money from the 5 properties at Enclave that came on board. So again, you know, we're not going to see those large reductions throughout the year from residential properties and annual reductions, but those 5 properties at Enclave were just completely wiped out with just those monthly basic annual reductions. So again, not to be a downer, but it's important to note. On page 3, this references our tax collection, so you can see we've collected 91.7% of what was billed out. This is where we budgeted to collect about 95.3. Again, I do believe we will continue to see this number being low until December, since we have a 0% penalty in place to help taxpayers across the district. So we did that intentionally. I don't think we'll get a good sense of this number until we close out taxes the end of December. Page 4 gets into the EIT collections. So you can see EIT collections actually continue to be strong despite what Berkheimer, who is the county tax collector, are estimating and telling us. They continue to stand behind their estimates that we'll see $50,000 in reductions average per month, but we are just not seeing that happen. One of the questions I continue to ask that concerns me is the Philadelphia issue, and are there less people paying taxes in Philadelphia, which means we're receiving more EIT directly? You know, Berkheimer's response to that is no, they are not seeing that. And they provided a whole lot of reasons about why we're not seeing reductions, but it's not lining up. So we don't get the underlying data behind this. We rely on Berkheimer to give that to us. But you know, we'll keep reporting on what we're seeing. I will keep asking Berkheimer questions. And as I get, you know, better information, I'll let you know. We'll just continue to monitor trends. And then on the last page, the grant funding, the only thing I wanted to point out there is the state did make all school districts aware. So we've received a number of different allocations of funding related to the federal CARES dollars. They came in different buckets. So PCCD was one of the initial ones we received. That was actually broken apart into 2 pieces. So we already received and spent, that was our initial block of funding that we spent by October 31st. We did receive notice of our second allocation, which will be about $115,000. And we will have until September 2022 to spend those dollars, which is actually good because we'll have some dollars that we'll be able to hold potentially, depending on how the needs roll out this year, into the 21-22 budget to help with some of the COVID related costs that may continue into next year. So I'll stop there and take any questions on the other financial reports.
All right, comments or questions from the committee or the board? Jen.
Yes. So Andy, those reassessments that we keep getting, is that typical? You see that in other school districts about the same rate? Yeah, it's nothing.
Yeah, I can't necessarily say whether it's the same rate, but yes, every year property owners have the ability to file an appeal of the assessment with Montgomery County. So yes, it's just an annual process that occurs.
Art.
We're seeing it more often, I think, Andy. I mean, in my many years serving on the board, rarely would I see a residential home have an adjustment made, ask for reassessments. I think there's 2 or 3 of them tonight, and we had a bunch in Dublin Hunt, I think it was last month. I think we're going to see more and more of these. And when people say, well, we have all these homes being developed in Upper Dublin, but reassessments is going to be more and more of a concern in all districts. One, ironically, we have less commercial than many of our neighbors. So, and many of those reassessments have already occurred, and we have stipulations in there that they can't come back again. But reassessments is going to continue to haunt us more and more. And we know there's not going to be a reassessment of the county. That's really probably what we need to be done to equal out the inequity. And more expensive homes are still challenged to be sold in Upper Dublin at this time. It's, it's those moderate homes that are really selling, and the more expensive homes are sitting still, for a time.
I agree that in my experience, I wish I had data to back it up, but my sense is that residential appeals are picking up in pace. But I don't have real data. Andy, may it be that the wage tax issue we won't see until taxes are reconciled after April 15th?
I mean, that you could see some of that, if people are making estimated payments throughout the year on businesses and stuff like that. But, a lot of that should have been resolved after taxes were filed in July 15th, is when Berkheimer was estimating a slowdown, and we just never saw that.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments or questions from the committee or the board? All right. So we'll move that one forward to the legislative meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Moving on to preliminary budget discussion for next year.
Yeah, so this is not the formal presentation. This is sort of an early look at the preliminary budget for next year, and start to talk about how we want to proceed through the early decision that boards need to make around the budget for next year. So we began the budget process for 21-21 school year, or 21-22 school year, at the October Finance Committee meeting. And at that meeting, we reviewed major budget assumptions that are being used to create this early look document, and then the multi-year future projections. We've reached a point already where the first major decision needs to be thought about and considered for the budget process. So in the memo that's attached to this agenda, I've laid out the decision that needs to be made with a recommendation. There's some major budget highlights in here. And what I want to do tonight is just give a high-level summary, and then sort of take questions and talk about what we want to do for the December Finance Committee meeting. So again, I know I do sound like a broken record on this point, but I believe I need to continue saying this, in that the current and future economic impacts to local revenue and expenditures as a result of COVID are just continue to remain unknown, for a number of reasons, including the EIT discussion that we just had. We have students in school, and now we're going to have students out of school again. So some of the products that we've purchased, we don't have any real data on how it's being used in classrooms, just a very short time, and we'll continue to monitor that throughout the year. Act 1 of 2006 defines the budget timelines for school districts. And we're sort of, like I said, we've reached that first major point. By the December 21st board meeting, the next month's board meeting, we have to decide which path we're going to choose for the 21-22 budget. There's 2 paths that the budget can take. It can take the path of an opt-out resolution, which is confirming that we're deciding now that the final budget will not include a tax rate above the Act 1 index, which is 3.0%. for next year. Or we could approve a preliminary budget, apply for referendum exceptions, which allow for tax increases above the Act 1 index. So the exceptions that we have access to or estimate are PSERs, which we've estimated we will not qualify for exceptions next year. Again, it's a calculation set by the state. We just plug our numbers in and then it's certified by the state. Special education, we believe there's the ability to apply for $870,000 worth of exceptions, which would equate to about 1.1%. So if we applied for exceptions, that would allow the board to have access to about 4.1% of tax increases for next year. So no matter which path is chosen, the tax rate is never set until the final budget is approved in June. So whichever path is chosen, it's not set till June. Nothing's set in stone. I think my recommendation tonight is the opt-out resolution to stay at or below the Act 1 index. I believe this is achievable even with the current structural budget deficit that we are facing. I think 3% is a sufficient amount of additional revenue to have access to. But again, ultimately, that's the board's decision to make. Budget challenges that we need to address, no matter which direction we go, is we're starting from a deficit of over $3.8 million, which is in the budget, the current year budget. And the largest revenue source that we deal with are property taxes. So that's exactly what we're talking about here is how do we increase our largest revenue source as we look out? And if we wouldn't, how do we fund our expenditures? We are seeing assessed value across Upper Dublin Township basically remain flat over the last 7 to 8 years, basically due to large assessment appeals by top 10 taxpayers. So, that's really the big thing that's impacting our school district as far as assessed values go. The preliminary budget does include a tax increase placeholder of 3%. We talked about that at the last meeting. And that generates a total of about $2.3 million in new revenue. Prudential tax ends, and we see about $700,000 from that tax credit ending additionally. And the collection rate was increased to 97%. That adds $1.2 million. So we're looking at total additional revenue of about $4.2 million. New developments are a major item that could have a positive impact on our budget as we look out. Again, we see the Enclave selling and building. Madison Estates, we know 15 homes are sold in there, none are assessed yet. And we do expect the Promenade to start to turn online very soon. So we're not sitting back and hoping that solves all of our issues, but it's definitely a positive that we have on our side as we start to look out. No additional assessed value is factored into this preliminary budget at this time. And I will continue to monitor that and we'll adjust it as we see it come in. We also see major expenses increasing by about $5.2 million. So even though revenues are increasing by $4.3 million, we are adding about $900,000 to the deficit as our starting point as we look out to next year. 21-22 budget and beyond the projections do not include any placeholder for a transfer to capital projects for future district building capital needs. And that's something we will absolutely need to address as well in the near future. So while I won't walk through all of them, there's tables on the following pages on the last page that show you tax revenue increases by percentage. So Brooke's scrolling here. So new revenue scenarios, property taxes increase. So you can, there's just different scenarios there about what that would do. You can see at 3% for the median annual assessed household, it would be about a $209 increase per year. Just so you can see kind of the solutions there. And then table 2 is a chart of all of our major expense driver increases that we're seeing. Again, one of the big ones we talked about last month. So nothing new in there except for charter school tuition is a big one. Again, we haven't seen any major additions or decreases. Things have held pretty steady. So we're still around $1 million in charter school tuition costs that we're looking at paying this year. And that's what we have in our budget for next year. So it's about a $639,000 increase year over year. So just in summary, I think, that was a quick high level review. And, what I'm really looking for from the board tonight is direction on, does the board want to have the opt-out resolution passed to stay within the index of 3%? Or are exceptions, applying for the special education exceptions and passing a preliminary budget, something the board wants to consider at the December meeting? So I'm happy to answer questions first, and then certainly look for some feedback on how to proceed for December.
Yeah, so let's start with questions on these. Anyone have questions, members of the committee or the board? Art, go ahead.
I think it's important to emphasize again the additional charter school costs. Annie, am I correct? In the past, last year was a little over 300,000, and now we see $1 million. So it's more than a 200% increase in charter school, cyber charter school costs. You're nodding your head yes. Okay,
That's correct.
I want to emphasize that. I also want to emphasize, you always say that our property taxes account for over 73% of our district revenues. I always like to emphasize that local revenue accounts for over 83%. So, we just have to realize how critical local revenues play, not only property tax, but all the EIT and the lower amounts of local revenue that we generate. I just wanted to make those 2 points.
Andy, the 800,000+ for potential exception for special ed feels to me like a bigger than historical number, bigger than the historical average for us. Is that, am I right about that?
So I don't have those numbers in front of me. I don't know if Ms. Baldessano, Jen, do you have any information that you have off the top of your head on that?
No, I don't. I'm trying to pull up the file from last year just to compare.
The reason, is that, I know that number fluctuates from year to year. Can you just remind us where that number comes from?
Jen, do you have that? Can you walk through what the calculation is? It's a calculation. The state gives us the calculation. So I don't know, Jen, if you can walk through that quickly.
Yeah, it's a comparison of our actual special ed expenditures from one year to the next. And it does like a difference between it. And then it's also based off the increase, and then it's calculated by the index as well. So if our expenses are above that calculation, then that's what we're eligible for. And looks like, try and look back. I think last year, for current year budget, it was around $770,000 we were eligible for.
Okay, so it wasn't as much higher as I thought, but it was higher. So that indicates that our special ed expenses are higher, right?
Right.
Okay.
Mark,
Mark,
just to add to that, when the state and the federal government continues to underfund and not have increases in their expenditures to special ed, it leaves it to the local districts to pay more and more. Therefore, that's why that difference currently exists. IDEA has never been fully funded at the federal level, and the special ed allocation from the state has been level funded at best.
Right. Okay. Any other comments or questions? All right. Does anyone want to venture an opinion on which of the budget paths to take the opt-out and limit ourselves to 3%, or potentially apply for exceptions and have access to as much as 4.1%?
I'll gladly go first. I think given the climate, as much as I know that we rely on the local income, I can't conceive of a way that it would be in the best interest of our taxpayers to tax above the index at this point, just given the situation with people's finances, but I'm open to listen. That's my first thought.
Yeah, I concur. I don't see the feasibility right now from a taxpayer standpoint, but we have another month to make the decision.
We do, although it would be helpful for Andy to know what to prepare for next month's Finance Committee, because it needs to get on the December legislative agenda. But you're right, we don't have to lock it in right now. Anybody else have an opinion?
Sure. I think the maximum we should be looking at is the index, and I would hope as we go through the process over the next 6 months or whatever that we look to be below that 3%, if at all possible.
Okay, Titia?
Yeah, I just don't see that we can go as high as 3%. I mean, to me, that is extreme at the high end already. I mean, I know we're going to have costs and other things, but we have to live within the 3% and hopefully less than that.
Hey, Jen?
I concur, and I trust if Andy thinks that he can make that happen, I think that we should do that. It would be a hardship on our community at this point to go above that 3%.
Jeff?
I agree as well.
Okay. I do too. I think it's the sticking to the 3% as a limit is the right thing to do here. It is still higher than our tax increases have been over the last many years. I don't have that document in front of me, but it's been a while since we were that high. I will remind everyone that, of course, if we don't take all of those options, we do have to be careful to limit ourselves on the expense side, and that probably means hard choices ahead. And I'll also remind everyone that the index is a calculation of employment expenses. It's not a number pulled out of the air. It's an estimate of how much employment costs are rising based on past history. And over the long term, generally the tax increases are going to need to average out to be right around the index, because that's where those numbers come from, and that's our primary cost driver. So you can't no district really can stay consistently under the index forever, unless there are extenuating circumstances that help them, like improved assessments and that sort of thing. So over the long term, it's a great goal to stay under the index. It's probably not a realistic goal to stay under the index forever. But for as long as we can hold out with reasonable moderation, I think we should do that. Jen, your hand is still up. Did you have something else? All right. Okay, so Andy, I think you've got your direction on that. And let's move on. H and I are both settlement stipulations for residential assessment appeals.
Yes, and again, I think just to note one of the things that Dr. Levinowitz said, so these are a little different than, and yes, I agree, we have seen a number of these settlement stipulations. What happens here is that typically the way the appeal process works is a homeowner or a property owner appeals to the county. The county makes a decision to either lower the assessment or to not make any change. And typically when we see these settlement stipulations that come into play is these are both scenarios where residential properties appealed. The county said, no, we don't agree that any reduction is needed. And then what happens is these property owners appeal that decision. And the next step would be, if we want to take this to the court, we would need to take this to the court and litigate it, which there would be significant legal costs to do so. So this isn't really this isn't a decision to sort of just settle to not incur expenses. It's working with our solicitor. We look at what recent sales are. So we do our due diligence around this, and then we bring what we believe is a reasonable settlement back, to not end up in court over these types of appeals. So these are two residential appeals that we believe these are fair and reasonable settlements to move forward with. So I will, and it totals about $1,000 in tax loss for the one property and $1,500 for the other property. So I'll take any questions on that.
Yep, comments or questions? Okay, so members of the committee will move those to the legislative meeting?
Yes.
All right. Next up, we have a contract with Sweet Stevens, Katz & Williams.
U.S. Enrollment Services. Item J.
Oh, that's interesting. It's different on one screen than the other, but okay, let's do J first. Yeah, okay, go ahead with J. I must have an old copy I'm looking at here.
Got it. And I can do them in any order, but.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
U.S. Enrollment Services, so this should hopefully be a quick and easy one, but just to point out that we continue to look at, evaluate all processes and vendor relationships on a regular basis. So this is Ms. Kitten, our HR director. She believes this is an opportunity to both save money and create more efficient processes for employee benefits administration and the annual benefits open enrollment process. We currently use a product called Enroll for these processes, and just to be very honest, it's not a great product. It creates lots of issues for us internally. We currently pay $1.85 per employee per month for Enroll. We are looking at U.S. Enrollment as the replacement for that. U.S. Enrollment has a better product, a better solution, and we have gotten to a point where they have agreed to waive all fees per employee per month for the opportunity to present voluntary benefits to employees as they go through the benefits enrollment process. So that no fee will last for 3 years. After the third year, if they don't achieve their intended target from selling the voluntary benefits, the fee they would look to charge us would be $1 per employee per month, which is still significantly lower. So that's our recommendation to move forward with making this change.
Okay, Amy.
Just out of curiosity, in order to get to that rate, or actually to have the fees waived, what kinds of solicitations, how much communication with our employees, kind of what's the format, text, email, paper, that sort of thing, please?
It's a good question. So the first year, which would be at the end of this year when we go through the open enrollments process, it would be a required personal connection with every employee to go through the open enrollment process. So every employee, rather than just going on to an online solution to fill out all their paperwork, they would actually call and speak to somebody there. And then at that time, that person would not only, offer them voluntary benefits, but very first, they would walk them through all of the benefits that are available to them, make sure they educate them on all the options that are available to them, help them get set up for benefits, and then offer voluntary benefits. So it would be the first year only that they would require a sort of personal touch to go through the enrollment process.
Okay, I think that makes sense. I'm always cautious about these types of arrangements. I've utilized them in other organizations. I guess my only concern, and hopefully they can allay this concern, would be the forcefulness with which they have those conversations. I think it's fine to share information and be in front of our staff because it's good to give people options. However, I think a hard sell approach would not put us in good stead with our employees. So that's my only concern.
Your concern is well taken. I think Ms. Kitten and I have talked about that. I think from our standpoint, especially the HR standpoint, this is not something we would just lay on employees. I think Ms. Kitten would certainly, we would work with our unions, make them aware. I believe she may have already, so they know what to expect as they go through the process. And certainly her line would always be open if anyone feels that they're, being pressured along the way. So your point is well taken.
Thank you.
Art.
I wanted to piggyback on that. I think it's always concerning, as employees when a change is made. And I'm just, I I believe that you and Ashley have done your due diligence, know that this is a better option, that you've reached out to other districts that perhaps are using this, and eventually, will involve the union and all of our staff and teachers in rolling this out successfully.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of selling our eyeballs in general. However, I see a lot of benefits, at least in the first year here, of getting people to actually, put a little more thought into the open enrollment period than maybe they have in some time. I think we all know that what typically happens is people just keep going with whatever they have, whether that's in their best interest or not. So I think that's a benefit, as long as we do appropriate communications ahead of time with the staff to let them know this is coming and make sure they understand that they have the freedom to decline. I'm comfortable with it. Other than the pain of switching from one to another, this seems like a win-win-win all the way through. So I kind of like it with that caveat. Anyone else? All right, so members of the committee will move this one forward.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Now we're up to the contract with Sweet Stevens, item K.
So Dr. Yanni and Dr. Perez, feel free to jump in here if you have any color you want to add. I just want to simply say that Sweet Stevens Katz Williams is our counsel for special education matters. We've been happy with the services that they provide to us, and we're recommending moving forward with them. Again, the reason it's so early, they've already sent us sort of their renewal letter for 21-22 to let us know that they're keeping rates the same as they are today. So we just figured it would be a good time to not lose track of it and put it before the board and let you know that we would like to continue forward with them. So
we've been exceedingly happy with their service since we've made the switch. Hence why it's on the agenda tonight for the board's review.
All right, comments or questions?
Sure. I think the quality of the information and the service that they provide has been very good and is an improvement from when I began on the board in terms of special education matters. So I am in favor of moving this forward.
All right, anyone else? All right, I like doing it early to give everyone the confidence that that we're going to continue. So members of the committee will move this one forward.
Yes.
All right, and next we have a couple of donations. Go ahead and tell us about them.
yes, just very quickly, I'll cover both of these items and then ask for any questions at the end. So we have two donations here. Chris Horn received a notification that one of our former Upper Dublin School District teachers, the estate of Henry Virgilio, desired to donate a barely used baby grand piano to our district music program. The only, the main item here to note is that while the district, it's a donation, they're paying for all the transportation because of the construction at Sandy Run. It's actually going to be temporarily housed at the high school until the new Sandy Run facility is complete. Chris said they already have a very good piano at the high school, and the donors were very appreciative that he notified them of that, and they're fine with it going to Sandy Run. So it'll all get to the high school, and then eventually the district, we will be responsible for moving it from the high school to the middle school. And that's valued at approximately $21,000. And then there is a donation of 2 microscopes, again small, but it's a donation that is for the Upper Dublin High School program, valued at $300. So both of those are before the board for your decision.
Right. Certainly appreciate those donations. Art, go ahead.
Just wanted to comment, Andy, that the grand piano that we have, the Steinway grand that we have at the high school currently, was a donation of approximately $75,000 from a community member. So it's great to see that our donations of grand pianos continue to come in.
Yeah, anybody else? All right, again, thanks to the Virgilio family and whoever it was who donated the microscopes. We'll move those forward to the legislative.
Yes.
Yes.
All
Absolutely.
right, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our reports and recommendations. Next up is community input. If anyone in the community who's attending the meeting would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand, and I'll call on you in the order that those hands go up. While that happens, we did receive one piece of input by email ahead of the meeting, so I'll read that one first, and then I will get to the live commenters. Let me pull that up. So this comes from Anita Brister in Fort Washington. I have several concerns and questions about a possible bus garage near Fort Washington Elementary School at an estimated cost of $5 million. A bus garage was included in the cost of the new high school. The taxpayers approved a cost of $119 million through voting in a referendum in March 2007. The original location told to the taxpayers prior to the referendum was for the bus garage to be built at the high school. How much was budgeted in the 2007 high school project for a bus garage? Why was the bus garage not built as part of the high school project? What happened to the money budgeted for a bus garage? Has there ever been an audit of the high school project? If not, do you think you should consider one to find out what happened to the money for a bus garage? I'm very concerned that some of these questions have been asked before and not answered. Also, I find it unethical that the taxpayers did not get what they paid for and what was promised before the 2007 referendum. And now you are proposing that we pay again for something we already paid for, so we're being taxed twice for a bus garage. And that is the end of Ms. Brister's comments. Let's see. Next up, Ginny, go ahead. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Hi, Ginny Vitella. I have the same questions as Anita. I believe the site was supposed to be on the high school property like it was originally before the building was torn down. And I want to know why it was denied at that location at the township building, you know, at the high school originally. The bus depot, I feel like this is like we're spending money to save money. Parents are express their opinions of that location by that elementary school in a very strong way last year, or is it 2 years? I don't remember now, but those parents are now over concerned with mental health and lack of good quality education. And so this being snuck in at this time of COVID is really problematic, I think, because that lot by Fort Washington Elementary School, the fields at Fort Washington are unusable. There's one field, it's covered in water, it has no drainage, it's muddy, it's wet, the ball field doesn't work. We use some of it for an overflow parking lot. So what Fort Washington Elementary students use is the Lockash fields and the Field of Dreams. And the only way to get to them is via the lot in that gravel area that you're proposing to stuff all these buses. It's not that much square foot area from what I can see from an aerial footage. We have to, I believe, make do and do without. For 12 years, we've had these buses in this lot in the industrial park, which is, I think the industrial park is where buses should be located, not near residential homes and certainly not near elementary students. And currently we use that area as a car line and we use that for our promotion parade. That area is used and kids walk along it. It's also used for kids that use soccer and all that. I just picture all these buses and all this chaos there. It's a very small lot. There are spaces throughout the district. Who says, why on earth do we have to park all whatever 20 buses we have in one spot at all times? Why are we not using some of our area around the administrative building? I mean, couldn't these people that work in the transportation use an office in the admin area, park a couple buses there, park a couple at another school, park a couple at the gravel lot at the high school? I think we need to figure out how to make do and do without. For 12 years, they have not had a good location, right? So anything would be better at this point. And I think we have to think outside the box. We have one more year on the contract of the drivers and everything else, I believe. And this obviously is not going to get done in a year. So we have to find something to do with this upcoming when our lease ends with this current location. We have 3.86 million structural deficit. We have $1.1 million in loss of tax assessments. We have 5.193 million increase in major expenses. We're talking about a 3% tax increase, and we still have a structural deficit of 4.7 million. Now is not the time to be spending money to, quote, save money. We have heard of a placeholder before that was on the Sandy Run Middle School project, and that placeholder was at the pie in the sky $70 million number, right? And we're at $76 million. Now is not the time. Find other solutions, please. We beg of you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, oh, I'm sorry, that was the wrong button. Next up is Caitlyn Johnson. You'll have to unmute yourself, and please tell us where you're from.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I am from Ambler. I have a first grader for Washington Elementary School. I have 3 more sons that will be going into that school within the next couple years. And I also just want to echo what Jenny was saying and what other parents have been saying. And it just makes me sick to my stomach to think that we would put a bus depot near these children, these little children, the place that they're already using. Like, they walk across that every day. They don't have good fields. That's the field gyms is where they can go to play for gym class. And with COVID right now, I feel like this is one of just the most awful times to even be considering this. And I went to Upper Dublin High School. I've lived my whole life in this district. I don't understand why the buses aren't at the high school, but obviously something happened when I was in college, and who knows what decisions were made. But now I'm deeply invested in what's happening in this community, and the parents were saying we don't want it. So I don't understand why we aren't smart enough to figure something out, because I truly believe that we are, and that there's a lot of people in this community who could just also think outside the box, make something work, that we shouldn't move forward with something we can't afford and that people don't really want at this time. And then to also hear on the flip side that if you want to raise taxes to 3% and still give the community things that they don't want, like I guess I'm just a little baffled right now, and I'm hoping to just gain more clarity tonight. And I'm not really sure if I completely got it. I'm not really understanding the index that the one gentleman was talking about, because I didn't know if it includes like the seniors who are on fixed incomes or people who are unemployed right now. Like, I'm not really exactly sure how that works, and maybe that's just for me to do some research. But yes, I just want to echo what other people are saying, and I also do think that right now this is a hard time for a lot of people, and they don't have the luxury to come on these meetings at night and voice their opinions, but it's definitely been heard in the past, and it's being heard currently by everyone who attends Fort Washington, who knows the traffic that's already crazy and all the things that we're dealing with currently. That I hope that you guys can really consider putting this off just a little bit, or finding a better location if it's something that needs to be done right now because of the low interest rates. But overall, I am really grateful for the work that you're doing, or we wouldn't have moved back here. So thank you so much. Bye.
All right, thank you. Next up, Joanna Waldron.
Hi, this is Joanna. Thank you for taking my comment. The issue, well, I guess I have 2 issues with the RFP, and I know I've already expressed
Joanna, I have stopped
at previous meetings, that I have. I'm sorry?
Did anyone else hear Joanna through that?
I'm not
Okay,
hearing
so Joanna,
her.
you seem
Well.
to be dropping
In and out.
Yeah, you're dropping in and out. Joanna, if you would like.
Okay, I'll try again.
Okay. So what we'll do.
Is this any better?
That was a little better. Or maybe not.
No, we're still not hearing you.
Okay.
Joanna, maybe if you can email your comments, and we'll get back to you as best we can. I'm sorry that we can't hear you right now. I see no other comments. No other.
Yeah, I mean, You can't hear me at all because I think we talked at the last meeting. It's not working?
Yeah,
It's
you're
working
coming
now.
in and out.
I hear you now.
We hear every other word or so.
Okay, well, I mean, I think it's a disappointment that on a micro level, this RFP does not acknowledge any of the things that we talked about at the last meeting in terms of the use, the buffer, not, maintaining the field. I think these were important things, and I'll send you an email, but again, it's an issue.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll try to take those comments into account when we do hear the proposals back when they do come back. I see no other hands raised. Just a last chance for anyone to raise your hand. Okay, so I see none. I will close community input, and we will try to address some of these comments. I'll start with Dr. Yanni. Do you have any comments to respond to?
One of the things as we talk about the structural deficit, as we go through the budget process, just like we did last year, we'll be working from a zero-based budget standpoint. We'll be working with our principals and directors to build budgets for next year. That process is ongoing. It has already started, but it will ramp up once we're back from the Thanksgiving break.
All right, thank you. I'll comment just a little bit on the transportation facility. I have been calling some people around just for everyone's understanding. Very few members of the board or administration were around back in 2006, 2007, 2008 when this was all happening. So I've been calling people around who were around both on the township side and the school district side to try to pick some brains about some of the history here. And I don't think I have a complete story because people are digging back in their memories, but I do have an answer to some of these questions based on my interpretations of what I've heard back from these people. First of all, a lot of people have expressed memory that the plan for the bus depot was to be on the high school side of Loch Alsh. Most people who remember a location think it was where the gravel lot is now. We don't have any documentation at the moment to support that memory. Enough people remember it that there must have been some truth to it. But the only documentation we have found shows the location that we've shown adjacent to Field of Dreams. So I'm not sure where that memory comes from. I don't know why it may have been moved from one location to another, but that location currently is used for the geothermal wells for the high school HVAC system, and so that location is not suitable for a bus depot at this point. Let's see. But it does seem to be the case that the bus depot was part of the plan for the high school prior to the referendum. And the reason why it didn't happen seems to be that for some reason, permits were not approved at the township level. I don't have a good explanation for why not yet, but it seems to have been the decision at the time to move forward without it because we just needed to the district needed to get the high school built. And figured that out later, and later hasn't come until now. So I don't have a good answer for why it was not approved. I would like to have that answer because if we're putting forward the same proposal again, I want to make sure that that it doesn't fail for the same reason again. As for what happened to the money, the best understanding I have, so if it was part of the plan before the high school was built, then part of the $119 million estimate for the high school would have included that cost. So what happened to the money for it is a very good question. My best understanding is this, and this is just, again, based on people's memory, that the plan after we borrowed the $119 million for the high school was to take that bond fund and put it in an interest-bearing account, and then the economic crash happened in 2008. Interest rates went effectively to zero, and so all of the interest that was budgeted for those bond funds did not manifest and ate into, and that's effectively what where the bus depot money went to. Again, I don't have good truth on that. I don't have good documentation to support it. That's based on people's memories. Let's see. In terms of other locations, I know we say this every time. We own this land. We don't own other land. There is no chance that any other location is going to be as inexpensive as this. And I mean zero chance that we could find a location that's as cheap as this. So if it's really important to the community to spend more money on the transportation facility, we could investigate that. But right now we are trying to save money. This is very much a plan to save money because the cost of doing this is cheaper than the cost of continuing to do what we're doing. So that's why we're not considering other locations at this time. And some of these answers and more we are putting into a document that we will share publicly, hopefully soon. I'm going to say, Dr. Yanni, maybe by the end of this week or next week, we can have that documentation out.
We can have that out by the end of the day on Friday, if not first thing on Monday.
Okay, great. Any other comments on community input? Art, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Mark. And there was a comment made by a community member regarding audits and reviewing of all the documents. Let me be sure, and Andy can confirm this. When these projects are being done throughout, there's reviews by PDE in terms of the funds being expended appropriately. Not only that, at the end of the project, they come back to the district and do another very detailed audit to make sure that all funds are expended appropriately based on what we decided, in terms of how we spent the funds, and that there weren't monies moved around or anything illegal done. Those audits have been done. There have been audits, significant audits, and nothing has been found to be irregular with how the funds were expended with the high school project.
All right, thank you. Titia.
Yeah, about the bus garage, I think it's important to distinguish the fact that, or to identify the fact that this is parking of buses, but the garage part is largely for maintenance purposes. Is that correct?
That's correct. And then there's also a fueling facility. So there's three components to the project.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right, in that case, I will announce that our next Finance Committee meeting will be held on Wednesday, December 16th, 2020 at 6 p.m. At this time, we don't know whether that will be virtual or in person, but I'm gonna predict virtual, but stay tuned to find that out. And we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you.